I didn't cry anymore, not the way I used to. Somewhere along the way, I learned how to hurt quietly, how to tuck my sadness into corners where no one could see it. The house stayed clean, the food warm, the routine polished. To everyone else, we looked like a perfectly normal couple. But Leonardo? He had this way of making me feel invisible while pretending I was adored. And when he strayed, again and again, he'd say things like, "You'll never find anyone better than me." Like that was supposed to comfort me. Sometimes I believed him. Or maybe I was just too tired to believe in anything else. I'd look in the mirror and barely recognize the woman staring back. She looked so capable, so put together, but inside I felt hollow. I told myself I was staying for the sake of our daughter, for the house, for stability. But the truth? I was scared. Scared of failing, scared of being alone, scared that maybe, just maybe, he was right, and I wasn't worth more. Then came that evening. I was picking up Maya's toys in the living room, lost in thought, when I felt her tug on my sleeve. Just a gentle touch, like she didn't want to interrupt. She looked up at me with those big brown eyes and asked, "Mommy, why are you always sad when you think no one's looking?" I swear my heart didn't just crack, it collapsed. That one question cut through every excuse I'd ever made. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. For the first time in years, I couldn't lie to myself. I didn't answer her right away. How could I? What do you say when your child sees through the armor you've spent years perfecting? I knelt beside her and held her face in my hands, trying to smile. But I saw it, the worry behind her innocence, the way her little fingers reached for mine like she was the one trying to comfort me. That's when I realized something terrifying. My sadness wasn't invisible. It was teaching her something I never meant to pass down. She was only 8, but children have this way of knowing the truth, don't they? No matter how gentle our lies, they feel what we bury. I thought I was protecting her by staying, keeping the family together, shielding her from the chaos. But in that moment, I saw what I'd really been doing. Showing her a version of love that came with pain, silence, and pretending. And that terrified me more than any lonely night ever could. Because if I stayed, she'd think this was normal. I tucked her into bed that night and watched her sleep, her little hands curled into fists, like she was still holding on to me even in her dreams. And I just stood there, completely still. Because somewhere deep inside me, a part of me was waking up, the part I'd buried under all the fear and compromise. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have answers. But I did have a question echoing in my mind now, just like hers. Why am I always sad when no one's looking? And suddenly, not knowing wasn't enough anymore. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in bed beside Leonardo, listening to his breathing, feeling the distance between us stretch like a canyon. He turned away, as he always did, and I stared at the ceiling, eyes wide open, heart pounding. Not with fear this time, but with something else. A question, a spark, a quiet knowing. What if my daughter deserved a version of me that wasn't always hurting? What if I did too? I thought about the woman I used to be, before him. God, she was bold. She laughed without apologizing. She had plans. She believed in her own worth. Somewhere along the way, I handed pieces of her away, thinking love meant sacrifice, thinking endurance was strength. But looking at Maya's little face, I realized she doesn't need a mother who survives. She needs one who lives, one who shows her that love should feel safe, not small. That night, something shifted. I didn't make any big moves. I didn't pack a bag or slam a door. But inside me, the ground began to move. Something cracked open. It wasn't a decision yet, not quite. But it was a beginning. Because when your own child holds up a mirror to your pain, you can't look away forever. And whether I was ready or not, I knew the question had been asked. And now, I had to find the answer. That night, after Maya fell asleep, I found myself standing in front of the bathroom mirror, just staring. I touched my face like I was trying to recognize it. Not the makeup or the lines that time left behind, but me, the woman I used to be. I could still see her in there, buried under layers of compromise and quiet suffering. She hadn't vanished. She'd just gone silent. And suddenly, I missed her. God, I missed her so much. Before Leonardo, I was full of life. I danced barefoot in the kitchen, I read books just because they made me feel something, and I dreamed out loud. I was ambitious, fierce even. But somewhere along the way, I dimmed my own light to make space for his shadow. Every time he cheated and told me I was lucky he stayed, I believed a little less in myself. And every time I forgave him, it wasn't because I trusted him. It was because I doubted me. I started thinking about all the things I'd given up in the name of love. Friendships I let fade, job offers I declined, opinions I swallowed, and all the times I looked the other way, just to keep the peace. But there's no peace in losing yourself, is there? There's only numbness. A slow, quiet erosion of who you are. I didn't leave him back then because I was afraid I couldn't survive alone. But that night, looking at my reflection, I saw something terrifying. I wasn't surviving with him either. I sat on the bathroom floor for what felt like hours, knees pulled to my chest, the cool tiles pressing against my skin. And in that stillness, a truth began to rise. Not loud, but steady. If I stay, Maya will grow up thinking love looks like this. A woman shrinking. A home built on silence. Smiles that don't reach the eyes. And I couldn't stand the thought of her mistaking survival for happiness. Of her thinking that this was what a mother should look like when she loves. She watches me more than I realized. The way I bite my lip when I'm anxious. The way I move quickly to clean up his messes. Not just around the house, but in conversation, in mood, in energy. And I wondered what she was learning. That love means disappearing? That kindness means swallowing your voice? That being a woman means enduring until there's nothing left? No. No. I couldn't let her carry that forward like some inherited curse. And then I thought about her future, the woman she'd become. One day, someone might hurt her. Someone might try to convince her she's not enough. And if I stayed in this, what would I have taught her? To accept it? To make herself smaller, quieter, more obedient? That night, I didn't have a roadmap, but I did have a promise. I wouldn't let my daughter confuse pain with love, and to do that, I had to stop doing it myself. I went to bed that night with my heart pounding, but not from fear, from awareness. Like something inside me had shifted into place, quietly but firmly. I didn't tell Leonardo. He kissed me on the cheek, distracted, already half asleep, and I just watched him. I wondered how many years I'd spent trying to make him love me better, when I should have been learning to love myself louder. For the first time in a long while, I didn't reach for his hand. I pulled the blanket tighter around my own body. That small gesture felt like the beginning of something. And in the darkness, I started remembering the woman I used to be. Not in pain, but with a kind of reverence. Like I was unearthing a version of myself I had once loved deeply. The one who laughed at her own jokes, the one who didn't apologize for taking up space. She was still there, somewhere beneath the layers of guilt and doubt and silence. And I was going to find her again, piece by piece, no matter how long it took. Because I wanted Maya to know that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, "You deserve more." So I laid there, staring at the ceiling, no longer numb. I wasn't ready to leave yet, not physically. But emotionally, the first wall had cracked. And once that happens, you can't pretend it didn't. You can't unsee your own worth once it shows itself. Something inside me had been buried for so long, I'd forgotten how to feel it. But now that it was stirring again, I couldn't look away. Not for him. Not for fear. Not anymore. I started small. Nothing dramatic. Nothing loud. Just little things, like texting an old friend from college I hadn't spoken to in years. Her name popped into my mind while I was making coffee, and without overthinking, I hit send. It felt strange at first, like I was reaching across a canyon I wasn't sure I could cross. But when she replied, warm, surprised, genuinely happy to hear from me, something flickered inside. I hadn't realized how much I missed being seen, just for who I was. Then came the resume. God, I stared at that blank document for hours, unsure of where to begin. It had been so long since I even thought about my own career, my own goals. But I opened my laptop anyway, fingers trembling slightly, and typed my name. Just that, Carla Mendez. And there it was, a beginning, a reminder that I wasn't just a wife or a mother or someone constantly trying to manage another person's chaos. I was still a woman with skills, with ambition, with value. I found a therapist online one afternoon while Leonardo was at work. My palms were sweating just making the call. I wasn't sure what I was even going to say. But when the receptionist answered, I heard myself ask for an appointment. Just like that. And after I hung up, I cried. Not from fear this time, but from a strange kind of relief. Like I was finally letting someone help me hold what I'd been carrying alone for so long. Quiet steps, yes. But every one of them felt like a crack of light through a locked door. I became meticulous, almost methodical, not out of paranoia, but out of purpose. I started keeping a folder, locked and hidden, filled with screenshots, emails, credit card statements. Every late-night message Leonardo thought I'd never see, every hotel receipt he didn't bother hiding. I wasn't doing it for revenge. I was doing it for clarity. For the day I would need to look at the truth without flinching. The day I'd stop gaslighting myself into believing things weren't as bad as they felt. Each time I printed another page, I felt a strange mix of grief and strength. Grief for the years I'd given to a man who never really chose me. Strength because I was finally choosing myself. I found a lawyer through a woman in my therapy group. Quiet, brilliant, direct. She didn't look at me with pity. She looked at me like someone who had done this before, many times, and lived to tell. And in that first meeting when she said, "Whenever you're ready," I knew. I was getting close. At night, I read to Maya with more intention. Stories about brave girls and kind hearts, about finding your voice and standing your ground. And I watched her, how she leaned into me, how she laughed at the funny parts, how her breathing slowed when I whispered the last line. I wondered if she could sense it, the shift in me. I wasn't just reading anymore. I was becoming the kind of woman the heroines in those stories would look up to. And for the first time in a long time, I liked who I was becoming. During the day, I moved like a woman with secrets, not shameful ones, but sacred. I started taking long walks while Maya was at school, breathing in the air like I hadn't in years. I noticed things again, the rustle of trees, the smell of jasmine near the corner cafe, the way my shoulders finally sat a little lower, like the weight was beginning to lift. I wasn't free yet, but I was waking up to the idea that freedom was possible, that maybe I didn't have to ask for it. I could claim it. Leonardo hadn't noticed. Not really. He was too distracted, too used to my silence to realize it had started to carry a different tone. I no longer asked where he was going. I no longer flinched when he came home late. My power wasn't loud or confrontational, it was calm. And in that calm, I began to feel dangerous, in the best way. I was building something, slowly and carefully, like a woman preparing for a storm, but this time, not to survive it, to end it. The pieces were falling into place. I had support. I had proof. I had a plan. But more than that, I had something I hadn't felt in years. Resolve. The quiet kind, the kind that doesn't need to shout to be heard. And while Leonardo made his usual plans for their upcoming anniversary, I was making mine too. Except mine didn't involve pretending. Mine involved truth. And this time, I wouldn't be the one caught off guard. The morning of our anniversary felt still. Not peaceful, not quite, but intentional. I woke up before the sun, made coffee the way I like it, and watched the steam rise as I sat in silence. Leonardo was still asleep. His face looked soft, almost innocent, like he wasn't the man who had made me question my worth for over a decade. But I wasn't fooled anymore. That version of me, the one who needed his approval to feel enough, she didn't live here anymore. I dressed with care, not to impress him, but to remind myself of who I'd become. A fitted black blouse, dark jeans, my wedding ring left sitting on the dresser. He noticed, of course. Said I looked nice in that offhanded way he had. I nodded and smiled, saying thank you without letting the compliment settle. I wasn't hungry, but I made breakfast for Maya and packed her lunch with her favorite snacks. She kissed me on the cheek and said, "You smell happy today." And for the first time in years, I was. That evening, he had made dinner reservations, some upscale place we'd gone to once when we still pretended to like each other in public. He thought it would be like always, a performance. We'd smile for strangers, drink wine we couldn't pronounce, and ignore the hollow space between us. But I had other plans. I brought a folder in my bag, neatly labeled. Divorce papers, copies of emails, bank records. Everything he never thought I'd have the courage to hold, let alone hand over. He ordered for me, like he always did. Steak, medium well, as if I hadn't stopped eating red meat months ago. I didn't correct him. Let him play his part, one last time. The waiter poured the wine, and Leonardo launched into some rehearsed speech about reconnecting, about fresh starts, all with that charming smile he wore when he wanted something. I nodded, let him speak, my hands resting calmly on my lap. I wasn't nervous. Not anymore. I was just done. When the main course arrived, I reached into my bag. I didn't make a scene. No tears, no raised voice. I simply slid the folder across the table and watched his expression change. Slowly at first, then all at once. He flipped through the pages, his mouth tightening, eyes scanning for denial, for escape, for control. But there was none left to find. I took a sip of water, folded my hands, and waited. For the first time in our marriage, he was the one with nothing to say. And when he finally looked at me, stunned and pale, I met his gaze without blinking. "You always said no one else would love me," I said quietly. "But you forgot something important." I paused, not for effect, but because I wanted to feel the weight of the words I was about to say. "I already have someone who does. Maya. And now, I'm learning to love myself too." I didn't need applause. I didn't need his reaction. The power wasn't in what he did next. It was in what I had just done. He tried to speak, some blend of defense and disbelief, but I stood up before the excuses could take shape. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. Just finished. There's a silence that comes when a woman finally chooses herself. It's not cold. It's clean. I left the folder on the table, untouched steak cooling on my plate, and reached for my coat. He didn't follow me. Maybe for the first time, he understood that I wasn't bluffing, that the woman he thought would never leave had already gone. Outside, the night air was crisp. I walked to the car where Maya was waiting with my sister, her little face lighting up when she saw me. "Did you have a nice dinner?" she asked, kicking her feet from the back seat. I smiled and brushed her hair off her forehead. "I did exactly what I needed to," I told her. She didn't ask more, and I didn't explain. She didn't need to know the details, only that I was different now. that the story was changing. I drove us home, to our home. A small apartment we had quietly rented 2 weeks earlier. The furniture was mismatched, the walls still bare, but it was peaceful in a way our house had never been. Maya curled up beside me on the couch, blanket pulled to her chin, and whispered, "I'm glad we're here." I kissed her temple, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to apologize for anything. I had walked away from a life that almost broke me, and for once, I wasn't looking back. The mornings feel different now. There's a softness to them, not because life is suddenly easy, but because it's finally mine. I wake up before Maya and brew coffee while the sun spills through our kitchen window, warming the chipped counter and mismatched mugs. The silence isn't heavy anymore. It's gentle, freeing. I play music while I cook breakfast. Nothing fancy, just eggs and toast. And I catch myself humming along. I hadn't realized how long it had been since I did that. Our little apartment is far from perfect, but it feels like home in a way the old house never did. I've started a small business from our living room, organizing home spaces for other women who feel buried under chaos. It's slow, humble work. But it's mine. Every client, every dollar earned, feels like a quiet declaration. I'm rebuilding. Not for anyone else, not to prove anything. Just because I finally believe I'm worth investing in. And I want Maya to grow up seeing that. Sometimes I catch her watching me, the same way she used to, but now with something softer in her eyes, like she sees me differently, like I see me differently. And one night, as we baked cookies, she looked up from the mixing bowl and said, "You smile more now, Mommy. You laugh out loud." I didn't even know what to say. My throat tightened, my hands stilled. All I could do was smile back at her, heart wide open. Because she was right. I had come back to life, and she had noticed. I pulled her into my arms, flour still on my hands, and kissed her forehead. "Because now I'm free," I whispered. "And I promise you, I'll never choose fear over joy again." She didn't respond with words, just wrapped her arms around my waist and held on, like she believed me, like she felt the difference. And I stood there in that tiny kitchen, holding my daughter, thinking about how far we'd come. Not just in distance, but in truth. Fear used to run my life. It told me I couldn't do better. That I wasn't enough. That leaving would break everything. But it was staying that nearly broke me. Now, when I look around, at the laundry basket on the floor, the shoes by the door, the sticky notes on the fridge, I don't see chaos. I see freedom. I see a life I'm choosing every single day. Not out of desperation, but out of hope, out of belief, and more than anything, out of love. It's not perfect. Some nights I still feel the ache of what I lost. There are bills, long days, and moments where I wonder if I'm getting it all right. But then I hear Maya laugh from the other room, or she calls out, "Mom, come see this." And I remember, I didn't just leave something behind. I walked toward something too. A version of life where love doesn't hurt, where I can breathe, where my daughter is safe. And I am too. Tonight, after Maya went to bed, I sat on the couch alone with a cup of tea, watching the city lights flicker through the window. No noise, no tension, just peace. I scrolled through the photos on my phone, landing on the one I took earlier. Me and Maya in the kitchen, covered in flour, mid-laugh, both of us looking completely alive. I stared at it for a moment, then opened a message to my lawyer, attached the photo, typed one simple line beneath it. This is what winning looks like, and it is. Not the kind of winning that comes with applause or spotlights, but the quiet, defiant kind, where you reclaim your voice, your name, your joy, where you stop surviving and start living, where you become the kind of mother, woman, and soul that your younger self would be proud of. I didn't get here overnight. It took pain. It took reckoning. It took a question from an 8-year-old that shattered my world. and saved me. I still don't know what the future holds, but I know this. I will never again trade myself for the illusion of love. I will never again stay where I'm not seen, and I will raise my daughter to believe in joy, not fear, in strength, not silence. What stayed in the end wasn't pain or bitterness. It was love. Real love. The kind that holds your hand in the dark and says, "We're okay now." And finally, we are.
No matter what life threw at you, blood would always have your back. My name is Isla, and I learned far too late that sometimes your biggest heartbreak doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people who once kissed your forehead goodnight. I was the dependable one, the one who picked up the phone when no one else did. When my parents found their dream house, a cozy 2-story just outside the city, they were short on the down payment. My dad's credit was shot, and my mom had retired early due to health issues. Without hesitation, I stepped in. I had been saving for my own place for years, cutting corners, skipping vacations, even picking up freelance work after my regular job. But I didn't think twice. I put my name on the paperwork, signed the mortgage with them, and handed over nearly every dollar I had. They cried when I did it, told me I was their angel. My sister, Samira, even hugged me tight and promised, "We'll never forget this, Isla." I believed her. God, I really believed her. For a while, things felt good. We made memories in that house. Family barbecues, movie nights, birthdays with too much cake and not enough chairs. I felt like I had built something solid with them, something lasting. We were close, or so I thought. Then came the text. It popped up on our family group chat late one night. I had just finished folding laundry and was about to head to bed when my phone buzzed. I looked down and saw it. "You're dead to us. Our lawyer will call you. Your sister never let us down. We don't need you." I read it twice. My heart stopped, like someone had yanked the floor out from under me. The people I bled for, starved for, stood by when they had nothing. They had cut me off with a message. No phone call. No warning. Just that. I stared at the screen, numb. I should have screamed, cried, called them in a rage. But I didn't. Instead, I just replied, "As you wish." I sat there for a long time, staring at that glowing message on my phone screen. My fingers went cold. My mind couldn't catch up with the cruelty. It was as if my heart knew something terrible had happened, but my brain was still asking, "Is this real? You're dead to us." Not even a sentence, really. Just a sharp blade disguised as words. They didn't even address me by name. My own parents, they chose my sister, Samira. Again, apparently, Samira had been complaining for months behind my back, whispering poison into their ears, accusing me of controlling everything just because my name was on the house papers. She had always been the golden child, the one with the big smile and the bigger lies. She knew how to twist things until the truth bent around her like a ribbon. The message wasn't just emotional, it was legal. "Our lawyer will call you." They didn't want to talk to me like human beings. They wanted to handle me like a threat, a problem to be erased. I had no idea what Samira had told them, but it didn't even matter. They believed her, fully, without question. The worst part, there wasn't even hesitation in their words. No second guessing, no space for explanation. Just a clean, cold cut. I sat alone in my tiny apartment, the same one I'd kept so I wouldn't intrude on their privacy in the house I helped buy, and suddenly I felt like a stranger to my own life. Every moment I had invested in them, every dollar, every sacrifice, burned in my memory like ashes in the wind. But I didn't cry. Not then. I knew that if I let even one tear fall, I'd collapse. And they didn't deserve to see me broken. So I typed my response, "As you wish." And then I set the phone down calmly, quietly. My hands stopped shaking. I stood up, took a breath, and walked to the kitchen, not to cry into a pillow, but to pour myself a glass of water and start thinking. Because if they wanted to make this legal, then so would I. I wasn't born with much, but I worked hard, harder than most. While other kids partied after college, I took double shifts and freelanced late into the night. I had a simple goal. Save enough to build something lasting for the people I loved. My family didn't have wealth, but I believed if I gave enough, held tight enough, we could rise together. When my parents found the house, they were hesitant. It was out of reach, even with the seller offering a deal. But I saw the look in my mother's eyes as she stood on that front porch, imagining grandkids running around the garden. My father looked proud, but I could tell he was quietly calculating every dollar they didn't have. That night, I offered to help. I've been saving, I told them. I can cover the down payment. We can put the mortgage under my name. It'll be our house. My mother cried. My dad hugged me in a way he hadn't since I was a little girl. Samira clapped like a child at a birthday party. Isla, she said, you're actually saving us. Back then it felt like love. But that wasn't all. A year later, Samira fell into a financial hole after quitting her job to follow her entrepreneurial dreams. She maxed out 3 credit cards, had debt collectors calling her, and didn't know where to turn. She came to me, of course. I just need a few thousand to keep the lights on, she begged. Please don't tell Mom and Dad. So I wired her the money. Not once, not twice, but 5 times. I drained what little I had left for a vacation or even a used car because, well, she was my sister. I figured one day she'd find her footing and maybe say thank you. She never did. Then came Dad's stroke. It hit him hard, and my mom couldn't manage everything on her own. So I took time off work, drove him to appointments, argued with insurance, even sat through terrifying nights in the ICU just so she wouldn't have to do it alone. They said, you're our rock. They said, we'll never forget this. But they did. All of it. The money, the time, the love, the hours I gave up building my own life to hold theirs together. I never expected anything in return. Just loyalty. Just the truth. Just for them to stand beside me if things got hard. Instead, the moment Samira decided I was inconvenient, they chose her lies over my loyalty. And all those nights I thought I was helping my family, turns out I was just building a house for people who never planned to let me stay. As you wish. That's all I said. No yelling. No begging. No long paragraphs explaining myself or trying to correct their twisted version of the truth. Just 4 simple words. I sent the message and watched the 3 dots appear on the screen for a second, then disappear. No one replied, not even a fake moment of guilt. They probably thought they won, that I'd slink away quietly, humiliated and defeated, carrying the weight of a broken family on my back once again. Maybe they picture me sobbing in a corner, replaying their words until I apologized for sins I never committed. But they didn't know me, not really. What they didn't realize was I'd already mourned them. Long before that text ever came, I had felt the slow drip of distance, the coldness behind their smiles, the way Samira twisted every situation into her advantage. I had hoped, prayed, and worked to keep us together. But that text? That was the funeral. I buried the idea of us that night. The next morning, I put on a clean blouse, tied my hair back, and walked into my lawyer's office like a woman who had nothing left to lose, only dignity to reclaim. Mr. Rahman, a family lawyer I had consulted years ago when helping my parents with a mortgage, recognized me instantly. Isla, everything okay? I smiled. It will be. I need to make a change to some property documents. He blinked. The house. I nodded. Yes, I want my name off it. His eyes widened. You helped purchase it. That would mean. I know exactly what it means. I wasn't handing it to them out of kindness. I wasn't walking away because I was weak. I was playing the long game. You see, the house still had a clause in the deed, one that stated any removal or transfer of ownership required full consent and renegotiation of loan responsibility. Without me on the documents, they'd have to refinance from scratch. But their credit? Their income? It wouldn't be enough. Mr. Rahman looked over the paperwork carefully. Do you want to warn them? No, I said firmly. Let their lawyer call me. Let him panic first. He smirked and began drafting the forms. In that moment, I felt no anger, no sadness, just clarity. For once, I wasn't trying to be the fixer. I wasn't begging to be seen or heard. I was taking back control, not through revenge, but through strategy. Let them believe I was done. Let them think silence meant surrender. Because when you've been underestimated your whole life, the most powerful thing you can do is smile quietly and change the rules of the game when no one's looking. What they didn't know What no one in my family had bothered to understand was that I had never fully given them the power they thought they had over me. Sure, I put my name on the mortgage, signed the paperwork in good faith, and did what I thought was right. But there was something I never told them, something they took for granted because I never needed to flaunt it. I hadn't signed away my legal claim to the property. I was still the primary holder on the deed. My family had been so quick to push me aside, to assume I would quietly slip into the shadows. But in reality, I'd been keeping my options open. I knew exactly what I was doing when I helped them with the house. I had always been cautious, even in my generosity. I wasn't a fool. When I arrived at Mr. Rahman's office that morning, the plan started to fall into place. He was already drafting the necessary documents to formally remove my name from the house deed. He didn't ask questions about why I wanted it done so quietly, and I appreciated that. He had always been professional, treating me like a client, not a naive young woman who'd been taken advantage of. As he worked through the paperwork, I sat back, my mind replaying everything. The phone calls I'd made for them when they were stuck in traffic. The nights I stayed awake, making sure their health insurance was sorted out. The money I had given over and over again like it was nothing. And now they wanted to erase me from their lives like I was just some passing inconvenience. But they didn't realize they were dealing with someone who understood the fine print. My name was on the deed, but it wasn't just an ownership claim. It was a position of power. And once my name was removed from the house paperwork, they would lose the legal ability to control the property the way they thought they could. Without my consent, the house wasn't theirs. Not legally. I could have made a scene. I could have gone to them, told them what I was doing, and made sure they knew how I was playing my cards. But I didn't. I wanted them to feel the full weight of their mistake, the shock when they realized they couldn't fix this with a simple phone call or lawyer's letter. After I signed the final forms, I handed them back to Mr. Rahman, feeling a strange sense of peace. The paperwork would take a couple of days to process, but once it was done, the house would be legally up for grabs again. They wouldn't be able to refinance. They wouldn't be able to sell it, and I would be the one holding the power. But I wasn't looking for revenge. I was simply taking back what I had given. Quietly, methodically. They would soon learn that what they had taken for granted had cost them more than they could ever have imagined. 2 days later, I woke up to the sound of my phone ringing off the hook. The number on the screen was unfamiliar, but something in my gut told me it was about to be important. I picked up, still half asleep, trying to shake the haze of the morning. Hello. The voice on the other end was frantic, breathless. Isla? It's Mr. Kareem, your family's lawyer. My stomach dropped. My name was on the tip of his tongue, and the panic in his voice was unmistakable. Isla, we need to talk. Immediately. This is a serious situation. I sat up in bed, my heart racing. What's going on? There was a pause before he spoke again. The property paperwork. You legally removed your name from the deed. I felt the corner of my lips curl into a quiet smile. Yes, I did. He sputtered in disbelief. But Isla, you can't just do that. You helped buy the house. Your family's relying on that property. Without your name on the deed, they can't refinance, they can't sell it, they can't even make the mortgage payments without your approval. I leaned back against the pillows, my voice calm. I understand. That's why I did it. His voice rose in panic. This isn't just a minor legal misstep, Isla. You've completely cut them off from any claim to that property. Without you on the deed, they technically don't own it anymore. They have no legal right to the house. I could hear him tapping away at his keyboard, probably scanning through the legal documents like they were some unexpected disaster. You've put your family in a very difficult situation, he continued, his tone softer, almost pleading. If they don't fix this quickly, they could lose everything. My hands were steady, not shaking with guilt or fear as they might have expected. Instead, I felt calm, detached, a feeling I had been craving since that text had first landed in my inbox. I'm sure they'll figure it out, I said softly. I'm sure they'll manage. His frustration grew. Isla, please. Think about what you're doing. You're jeopardizing your entire family's future over this. They're not prepared for this kind of fallout. We're talking about a total financial disaster. They can't even access the house without you. You've left them essentially homeless. And for what? You've got to undo this. I knew exactly where he was coming from. He was trying to pressure me into reversing my decision. Maybe he thought I was angry. Maybe he thought I was hurt. But I wasn't. This wasn't about anger or pain anymore. This was about standing up for myself. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to fix everything. I wasn't trying to hold it all together for them. I had given enough. And now they would feel the consequences of taking me for granted. "I've made my choice," I said, my voice firm. "I'll leave it to you and your clients to figure out how to fix it." I hung up before he could say anything else, my fingers hovering over the phone for a moment. The weight of the decision didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt freeing. The chaos, the panic on the other end of that call, that was their burden now, not mine. I had simply taken back what was mine, and the reality of their mistake was just beginning to set in. I wasn't surprised when they showed up at my door. I knew it was only a matter of time. They had underestimated me, written me off, convinced I'd just roll over and beg them to take me back. But this wasn't a moment of weakness for me. It was a moment of clarity. It was late afternoon when I heard the knock. I knew exactly who it was before I even opened the door. Samira stood there first, her eyes red, face blotchy from crying. Behind her, my parents lingered, their expressions a mix of desperation and disbelief. Samira's voice trembled as soon as she saw me. "Isla, please. Please, you've got to fix this. You have to put your name back on the deed. We can't lose the house. We'll figure things out, I promise. We were wrong. We're sorry." Her words came in a rush, like a flood of guilt that she hoped would wash away her betrayal. I watched her, not with anger or sorrow, but with a detached calmness that shocked even me. "I'm sorry," I asked softly, as if I hadn't heard her clearly. "You're sorry." She nodded, sniffling. "Yes, I know we've hurt you. But Isla, we need you. You've always been there for us. Please don't do this. You can't let us lose everything." My father spoke up, his voice cracking with urgency. "Isla, listen to us. We don't know how to fix this without you. We're your family. You can't just throw everything away. Please, we need your help." I looked at them one by one, feeling the weight of the words they had texted me only days ago. "You're dead to us," I whispered, my voice barely audible, but the impact of those words echoed between us. "That's what you said, remember? Those exact words. You're dead to us. Our lawyer will call you. Your sister never let us down. We don't need you." Their faces froze in shock, and for a moment it felt like time stood still. I could see the regret in their eyes, the realization of the gravity of their actions slowly dawning on them. But there was no turning back now. I wasn't some backup plan they could fall back on when their world crumbled. "I don't need you to need me anymore," I said, stepping back slightly to close the door, but holding it open just enough to make my point clear. "You made your choice. You cut me out when I was your last resort, your backup. You kicked me to the curb. And now, you want me to fix it for you." I could see my father's hands shaking, his face twisted in a desperate plea. "Isla, don't do this. We're sorry. We need you. Please, I'll make it right. I shook my head, cutting him off. "No, you don't get to erase what you did, not with an apology. Not with tears. You made your choice, and now you deal with the consequences. I'm done fixing everything for you." I could see Samira's face crumple, tears spilling down her cheeks, but I couldn't find it in myself to comfort her. The betrayal had been too deep, too ingrained for me to forgive them with a simple apology. "Goodbye," I said, my voice firm. "I hope you figure it out, but I won't be the one to save you this time." And with that, I closed the door. Not out of anger, but out of finality. There was no going back, not for me, not for them. They had crossed a line they couldn't come back from. I never intended to destroy them. I didn't want to watch them crumble under the weight of their own actions. That wasn't my style. I wasn't interested in revenge. No, what I did was far more satisfying, far more meaningful in the long run. I wasn't about to burn bridges. I was simply going to walk away from a family that had already let me go. The first thing I did was sell the house. It wasn't just about the money. It was about ownership, about taking control of my life and taking away what they had so carelessly assumed they had a right to. The house was still legally mine, after all, and while they floundered in their panic, I remained calm, composed. There were no second thoughts, no wavering on my decision. I sold it quickly for a price that was more than fair, but still one that would leave my family scrambling. The proceeds, well, they weren't for me. Not entirely. I donated a significant portion to a women's shelter that I had volunteered at a few times in the past. It felt like the right thing to do, a powerful, healing way to use the money. The shelter had helped so many women escape abusive situations, find new starts. I wanted to support them, to give other women the kind of empowerment I was learning to embrace for myself. The rest of the money? That went into my own future, my new life. I invested it wisely, real estate, a bit of stock. It wasn't about the wealth. It was about security, independence, the kind of future I had never been able to imagine when I was always focused on everyone else. As for my family, well, they were left to deal with the fallout. It was a painful thing to witness, but they had made their bed, and now they had to lie in it. I stayed far away from them in the days that followed. The calls came, the apologies, the letters from their lawyer, full of threats and desperate pleas. They begged me to reverse the sale to give them back their home. They tried to manipulate me, appealing to my sense of guilt, my supposed sense of responsibility. But I didn't answer. I ignored it all. I refused to let them back into my life, not because I was heartless, but because I had learned the hard way that I couldn't let anyone hold that kind of power over me anymore. Weeks passed, and as I settled into my new apartment, I realized how peaceful it was, how truly free I felt. I wasn't weighed down by the constant pressure of being everyone else's savior. I wasn't responsible for keeping everything together. I could finally breathe, truly breathe for the first time in years. And then, one day, I received a message from Samira. It was short, a simple text that read, "We're sorry. We didn't understand. We've lost everything. Please talk to us." I stared at the screen, my heart oddly calm. There was no satisfaction in the message, no rush of triumph, just the quiet acceptance of a reality I had already come to terms with. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. My parents never called me again. They had moved on, just as they had always done when things got tough. But this time there was no pretending. There was no escaping the truth they had tried to bury under layers of manipulation and guilt. They had pushed me away, and now they were left to face the consequences of their betrayal alone. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. I wasn't living for anyone else. I wasn't sacrificing my own happiness for a family that didn't value me. I was living for myself, free from the chains of their expectations. And as I looked at the future, I couldn't help but feel a quiet satisfaction. I had let go of the family that had once meant everything to me. I had walked away, not with anger, but with dignity. And that was the true power I had taken back. I had finally chosen myself. The venue still smelled of fresh flowers and last-minute stress. Staff rushed around placing centerpieces and checking linens, but I wasn't watching them. My eyes were on the stage, the place my little brother would stand in just a few hours, marrying the love of his life. I should have been buzzing with excitement, but something didn't sit right in my chest. Still, I brushed it off. Nerves, maybe. I was just emotional. I had helped with everything. From tasting the cake samples when he and his fiancée were busy with work, to redesigning their seating chart twice when last-minute guests RSVP'd. I stayed up late, sewing together ribbon bundles for the wedding favors when the vendor messed up the delivery. I paid for the calligraphy on their invitations, quietly, without a fuss, because that's what family does, right? As I straightened out one of the napkins on a table, I imagined what the day would be like. Laughs, dancing, maybe a few tears during the speeches. I wondered if he'd mention me. Not that I needed the spotlight, God, no, but just a small thank you. Something that said, "Hey, I saw you. I appreciate you." That would have been enough. I had even turned down a big work presentation that clashed with the rehearsal dinner. My boss was furious, but I told myself this is once in a lifetime. My brother needs me. And deep down, I wanted to feel like I belonged. Like this family I'd always carried on my back might finally turn around and see me standing there too. The decorations were perfect. The menu, custom planned with their favorite foods, looked mouth-watering. I watched the bride's family arrive first, greeting everyone with glowing smiles. Then came mine, our parents, some cousins, aunts. My brother didn't even glance around to find me. But again, I let it go. Big day. So much going on. He'd see me soon. I smoothed my dress and smiled at a guest passing by. Today would be beautiful, I told myself. Today, I'd finally feel part of something. I had no idea that by nightfall, I'd feel more invisible than ever. The ceremony was lovely. She looked stunning. He looked nervous but happy. Vows were exchanged. Rings slipped on, and the kiss earned a round of applause that echoed through the vineyard. I clapped, too, smiling, pretending everything felt as perfect as it looked. But something had started to gnaw at me. Something small at first, like a loose thread you can't quite place. After the ceremony, the photographer started directing the family photos. Okay, we'll get the immediate family first, he said, waving everyone over. I stepped forward, but the photographer looked right through me. My mom ushered my brother, his bride, and their parents into position. Then came the groomsmen, bridesmaids, cousins. Even our second cousin, Sarah, who flew in from another state, was asked to join a group shot. Me. No one said my name. No one looked my way. I stood awkwardly to the side, waiting. Maybe they were saving a special one for siblings. That had to be it. But it never came. The photographer clicked away, then started packing up. My chest tightened. I walked over to my mother, trying to keep my voice light. Hey, was there a photo with siblings? She gave me a confused smile. Oh, honey, I think they just ran out of time. Don't worry. But they didn't run out of time. They took over 100 photos. Later, during the speeches, I held my breath when my brother took the mic. He thanked his new in-laws, his childhood best friend, even a co-worker who helped him with honeymoon plans. He mentioned growing up with unwavering support, and I leaned in, certain this was it. But then he looked over at our parents and smiled. You too gave me everything. You taught me what real love looks like. That was it. No mention of me. Not a word. Not even a glance. My throat burned. I laughed softly into my champagne glass, pretending I wasn't holding my breath, pretending it didn't matter. But inside I felt it, that slow, quiet cracking, like I had somehow died in their memory and no one told me. I wasn't just forgotten. I was erased, like I had never mattered to begin with. And in that moment, surrounded by glittering lights and polite claps, I started to question if I'd been fooling myself all along. I waited until the dance floor had filled and the lights dimmed a little, casting soft golden shadows across the tables. I needed to know. I needed to understand why. Maybe it was an oversight. Maybe stress had made him forget. That's what I told myself as I made my way toward him, weaving through laughing guests and clinking glasses. He stood near the bar, sipping something dark, his new wife by his side. I waited for her to turn away, then stepped in quietly. Hey, I said, forcing a smile. He turned, surprised. Oh, hey. I hesitated. Can I talk to you for a second? He nodded and followed me a few steps away from the crowd. I could still hear the music humming behind us, but it felt distant, muted, like I was underwater. I started swallowing hard. I noticed I wasn't in the family photos, or mentioned in your speech. And I don't mean to make this about me really, but it hurt. I've been here through everything. I helped with the wedding, the planning, the bills. His expression didn't shift, just this unreadable, distant look. I kept going, hoping something would click in his head. You know, I had to turn down a huge meeting to be here this weekend. I've done everything I could to support you. He stared at me for a beat too long. Then he shrugged. Honestly, he said, his voice flat, this day isn't about people who never made us proud. The words hit like ice water down my back. I blinked, not sure I heard him right. What? I breathed. He didn't flinch. You've always been the odd one out. You do your own thing, keep to yourself, and honestly, you've never really fit the mold. You moved out, barely come around, and when you do, you act like you're doing everyone a favor. I felt the ground tilt beneath me. My chest tightened. Fit the mold. I repeated, I've bailed you out of rent twice. I stayed up all night editing your resume when you got fired. I've given and never asked for anything back. He scoffed lightly. Well, thanks, I guess. But today's not about you. It's about family. I stared at him, stunned. And I'm not that. He didn't answer. My hands were trembling, but I nodded. That was all I could do. No tears. No more words. Okay, I whispered. Got it. I turned and walked back to my table by the exit, my heart pounding so loudly it drowned out the music. That was the moment something inside me snapped, not in anger, not even in sadness. Just finality. He made it clear I didn't belong. So I decided, right then, that I wouldn't pretend anymore either. As I sat at my table near the exit, staring blankly at the champagne bubbles in my glass, the music faded into background noise. My brother's words still echoed in my head, people who never made us proud. I wanted to laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was so wildly untrue, it almost felt like a cruel joke. They didn't know the memories I carried, the ones I never asked credit for. They didn't know that when we were kids and he broke Dad's expensive watch, I told him it was me. I took the grounding, the yelling, the icy silence for a week because he was scared. He was just a kid, and I figured that's what big sisters do. They didn't know that during college, when he was failing his math class and terrified of losing his scholarship, I stayed up for nights helping him cram, rewriting notes, tutoring him even when I had my own finals. I skipped parties, gave up a spring break trip, all so he could pass. They didn't know that when he lost his job at 25 and moved back home with nothing, I quietly sent our parents money every month to cover the extra bills. I told them to pretend it was their idea, to protect his pride. And when he started that side hustle selling art prints, I was his first buyer. I made fake accounts just to boost his reviews. And maybe the one that stings the most, I passed on grad school in another city because Mom cried about losing the glue of the family. I stayed. I settled for a job I didn't love just to keep the peace, just to be close. I did it all without expectation. No medals, no applause, not even acknowledgement. I didn't need it, but being called a disappointment, being told I didn't make them proud, that broke something sacred. They had no idea how many times I'd put myself last, how many doors I quietly closed on my own future, thinking I was helping to build something that mattered, something we could all stand inside together. But the truth was, I was building a home that only ever had one locked door, and I was always on the other side of it. And now they'd shut it for good. I sat there, alone at the table by the exit, the room full of laughter, chatter, and the clinking of glasses. It felt as if the whole world was celebrating, and I was an outsider watching from behind a foggy window. My hands were cold. I could still hear the faint buzz of the music, but it didn't reach me. I was in a bubble of my own, a place where my brother's words replayed over and over, cutting deeper each time. This day isn't about people who never made us proud. It was as if the very foundation of everything I had believed about family had crumbled, and I had been left standing in the ruins, unsure of what to do next. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But what good would that do? I had already tried to fit in, to be the good sister, to do what was right. But none of it mattered. None of it had ever mattered. The silence around me felt suffocating, the hum of the event now distant. I couldn't even bring myself to look at the dance floor, where couples spun around in joy. Instead, I just stared at the untouched champagne in my glass, the bubbles rising, popping with a tiny fizz. I wanted to drop the glass to the floor, shatter it, and let the sound fill the space. But I didn't. And then, like a slow burn, something shifted inside me. The quiet sting of betrayal morphed into something else. Something stronger. A realization. A seed planted deep in the soil of my heart that had been waiting for this moment to bloom. I wasn't going to sit here quietly anymore. I wasn't going to let them forget me again. If they wanted to erase me, fine. But I would leave a mark so lasting they would never be able to get rid of it. I would make sure of that. My fingers tightened around the stem of the glass, and I stood up. The floor beneath my feet seemed to vibrate with new energy. I wasn't invisible. Not anymore. This wasn't just about what I had been robbed of. It was about the power I now held. The power to take control. And I knew exactly what to do. I left the table without looking back. My movements were deliberate, controlled. Everything was quiet, despite the chaos around me. The wedding was still in full swing. Guests were dancing, laughing, lost in the celebration. But I wasn't a part of it anymore. Not in any way that mattered. I stepped outside into the cool night air, the faint hum of the party muffled behind me. My phone was in my hand before I even realized it, my fingers moving with a purpose I couldn't quite explain. The catering company's number was already saved in my contacts. I had made sure of that earlier when I was helping organize everything. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the call button for a moment, as if the decision had yet to fully settle inside me. But it had. I wasn't going to back down now. The ringing on the other end felt too loud, too sharp. It echoed in my ears like a ticking clock, counting down the final moments of the choice I had just made. It felt like 100 voices screaming at me to stop, telling me that I was overreacting, that there was no need to take things this far. But the voice inside me, the voice that had been silenced for years, was louder now. "Good evening," a voice answered. "How can I assist you?" I took a breath. "I need to cancel the final payment for the wedding." The woman on the other end paused. I'm sorry, could you clarify? You'd like to cancel?" I let the question hang in the air for a moment, my fingers tapping lightly on the side of the phone. Part of me wanted to hesitate, to think it through, but I couldn't. I was tired of thinking. Tired of being the good sister, the one who always helped, the one who bent over backward for people who wouldn't even show me the smallest amount of gratitude. "Yeah," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos building inside me. "I want to cancel the final payment. I don't want any of the food to be delivered." I could hear her typing on the other end. "Are you sure, ma'am? We've already prepared." "I'm sure," I interrupted softly. "Cancel it all." There was a long pause, and I could feel her confusion through the phone. But I didn't care. No more hesitation, no more explaining myself. I was done with trying to be the person everyone could rely on, only to be overlooked when it mattered. "I'll also need to change the contact info for any future correspondence," I added, my voice even. "Make sure the payment doesn't go through." Another silence. Then she simply replied, "Understood, ma'am. I'll take care of that right away." I hung up the phone before she could say anything else. The night air felt colder now, but there was a warmth spreading inside me, a sense of power, however small. I hadn't screamed. I hadn't fought. I'd simply acted. And in that quiet, simple decision, I had just taken the first step in making them realize what it felt like to be forgotten. The first few minutes were filled with confusion. Guests glanced at each other, wondering if the delay was just a temporary hiccup. The air was still thick with laughter, people sipping their drinks, chatting, but there was an underlying tension that hadn't been there before. "Isn't the first course supposed to be served by now?" someone asked, looking at the empty tables. The silver platters that had once gleamed with anticipation now sat still untouched. The clink of glasses seemed louder now, the conversations a little more strained. I sat in my quiet corner, just beyond the reach of the ballroom lights, watching it all unfold. I didn't have to say a word. No explanations. No dramatic confrontations. It was all happening without me needing to lift a finger. Then I saw him, the groom, my brother, standing at the far end of the room. He looked like he was about to burst. His jaw was clenched, his eyes scanning the crowd like he was looking for someone to blame. "Where's the food?" he muttered under his breath, walking hurriedly toward the catering manager. I could hear the panic in his voice, even from across the room. "Why is nothing coming out?" The manager, sweating under the pressure, scrambled to explain. "There's been a delay, sir. The delivery is—" "No," my brother cut him off, his voice rising slightly. "This is the first course. Why are we even waiting for it? It should have been here by now. What the hell is going on?" I didn't need to be close to hear the tension in his words. Guests were starting to notice now, their conversations halting. Some people fidgeted in their seats. Others exchanged awkward glances. It was impossible to ignore the growing awkwardness. Whispers began to float around the room. Maybe there's a problem with the kitchen? Shouldn't the wedding planner have confirmed everything was ready? The caterers were running around now, faces flushed with embarrassment. They checked their phones, muttered among themselves, but the food never came. Not even the appetizers. Then the family, sensing the unease, began to unravel in their own way. My parents were suddenly up pacing, looking for answers, offering explanations that were half-hearted at best. My mother shot a nervous look at my brother, who was growing visibly more anxious. The room was filling with a strange, uncomfortable tension. Every minute felt like an hour. And through it all, I just sat there watching. The satisfaction bubbling inside me wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, calculated. For once, I didn't have to justify my actions. The reality of the situation spoke louder than anything I could have said. The groom, now visibly flustered, hurried back to the head table, scanning the crowd as if expecting someone to step forward and fix this disaster. But no one did. I glanced over at him once more, noticing how desperate he looked. His newlywed smile had faded, and all that remained was the truth. This day, the one he'd made all about appearances, was now falling apart in front of him. No one knew what was happening, not truly. But I knew, and for once, I didn't care to explain. The room was still in chaos. The food crisis had reached its peak, and whispers had turned into loud conversations. My brother was trying, failing, to put on a brave face, attempting to placate the guests, offering them drinks and excuses. But it was clear. The magic of his wedding day was unraveling at the seams. Guests were now staring at the empty tables, awkwardly trying to make the best of it. Some looked at the groom, some at the catering team, and then, as if drawn by an invisible force, their eyes slowly shifted to me. I was still sitting by the exit, watching it all with quiet detachment, the weight of the situation settling comfortably in the pit of my stomach. The world was now turning its attention on me, in a way I hadn't anticipated. At first, I had been a quiet presence, unnoticed in the corner. But as the night wore on, I became the subtle center of the storm. The truth, unspoken but undeniable, was written on their faces. My absence from the speeches, my exclusion from the photos. Those things had come back to haunt them. It wasn't long before my brother, his eyes frantic with frustration, made his way over to me. He stopped in front of my table, his posture tense, his gaze shifting from the empty tables to my calm face. He opened his mouth to speak, but his words faltered. He couldn't quite grasp what to say anymore. All his rehearsed lines about gratitude and family, about how today was supposed to be perfect, now felt hollow. I could see the realization in his eyes, and it stung him more than any harsh word I could have thrown at him. "You," he began, then paused, his voice cracking. "Why would you do this?" There was no anger in me anymore, just a quiet, steady calmness that had grown within me in the past few hours. I didn't need to yell, didn't need to explain. He'd made his choice a long time ago, and now he had to live with it. I looked at him, meeting his gaze without blinking, and shook my head slowly. "You don't get to ask that now," I said, my voice low but resolute. "Not after everything." The guilt started creeping into his eyes, but it didn't matter anymore. I wasn't the person who needed to be fixed. I wasn't the one who had let myself be forgotten. The weight of his regret settled over him, but it didn't belong to me. I stood up, gracefully, without a hint of bitterness. My eyes met those of the people still glancing at me, and for a brief moment, there was nothing left to prove. No words to say, no justifications to make. I had already said everything I needed to say without a single word. My actions had done all the talking. I took one last look at my brother, the man I had once loved with all my heart, the man who had meant the world to me. Now he was just another figure in a room full of people who couldn't see what was right in front of them. Without another glance, I turned and walked toward the exit. I didn't need anyone to follow. I didn't need their apologies or their guilt-ridden eyes. I had made my peace. The night wasn't mine anymore. But I knew one thing for sure. Their day had become mine, and they would never forget it,